Welcome to Byte-Sized Tech, where we like to blend casual conversations with some insightful discussions on the latest in technology and gadgets. Today, we're diving into some seriously cool innovations that could change the way we eat and get around in the future. We've got a tiny plant with massive potential, the electric vehicle revolution heating up, and even a look at how government reform could impact it all.
Yeah, it's fascinating how technology, global issues, economic policies, they're all weaving together to shape the future, especially with the whole US-China relationship being such a hot topic right now.
Okay, so first up, let's talk food. You know how plant-based proteins are all the rage? Well, get this. There's this tiny aquatic plant called duckweed, or water lentils, as some folks call it. That could be a total game changer.
Oh yeah. What makes water lentils so special is their ability to produce rubisco. It's a protein
Bisco.
you've probably never heard of, but it's actually in every leafy green you eat. And the amazing thing is water lentils are incredibly efficient at producing it.
So we're not just talking about another veggie burger here, right?
Not at all. This is about creating a whole new source of protein that's super sustainable and cost-effective. Think about it. Leafy greens are everywhere, and this company has figured out how to extract that protein powerhouse rubisco from water lentils.
So they're basically tapping into a protein gold mine that's been right under our noses this whole time. Do they actually have products on the market already?
Absolutely. They even have a production facility in West Texas, but the demand is so high, they're looking for $30 million to expand. That tells you something about how much the food industry is buzzing about this.
I bet. And speaking of the food industry, I heard Chipotle is even getting in on the action.
Yep, they're partnering with the company to use this water lentil protein in some of their recipes, looking for cleaner, healthier ingredients, and this fits the bill perfectly.
So imagine your next burrito bowl being even healthier and more sustainable. That's pretty cool.
And this is just the tip of the iceberg. They're expecting approvals from the FDA and European Food Safety Authority by 2025-2026. That opens up a massive global market for water lentil-based ingredients.
Wow, that's a game changer, all right. So from a tiny plant to the future of food, that's pretty incredible. Okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about electric vehicles, or EVs, another area that's seeing some serious innovation. I know there's a lot of talk about this $7,500 federal tax credit for EVs and whether it's going to stick around.
Yeah, that tax credit has been a huge deal for making EVs more affordable, and it also helps protect American manufacturing jobs, particularly in places like Michigan, South Carolina, Illinois, where EVs are being built.
I get that it helps with the cost, but how exactly does it support those manufacturing jobs?
Well, think of it as an incentive for both buyers and manufacturers. By making EVs more appealing to consumers, it creates demand, which in turn encourages companies to invest in production here in the U.S. It's had bipartisan support for a while, but now some lawmakers are proposing to eliminate it.
It seems like EVs are becoming more competitive in price compared to gas-powered cars, but wouldn't getting rid of that tax credit slow things down? And what about the charging situation? I know a lot of people are hesitant to buy EVs because they're worried about finding charging stations.
You've hit on a major hurdle. The lack of widespread charging infrastructure is a big concern for potential buyers. That's why we're seeing more hybrid models popping up. They offer a kind of stepping stone.
So are hybrids the answer then?
They're part of the solution for sure. But to really get everyone on board with EVs, we need a major investment in charging infrastructure. That's where strong government policies can make a huge difference. Think of it like building a network of gas stations, but for electricity.
I see what you mean. So the government would play a key role in making that happen.
Exactly. And we've seen how successful this can be. California's tailpipe emissions regulations really pushed the EV market forward, encouraged companies to invest in charging stations. Now you see companies like Pepsi, FedEx, and even school districts using EVs because they're actually cheaper to operate in the long run.
That makes sense. Lower operating costs are a big incentive for businesses. But some people argue that EVs can now compete without subsidies. What's your take on that?
While there's some truth to that, subsidies and regulations are still important, especially in the early stages of any new technology. They help overcome initial hurdles and create a more stable environment for long-term growth. Without that support, we risk stalling progress towards cleaner transportation and energy independence.
So it's about striking that balance between letting the market do its thing and providing a little nudge in the right direction.
Precisely. And that's where government policies and regulations come in. They can help steer us towards a future where EVs are not just a niche market, but the norm. Now, speaking of government, there's another big conversation happening around government reform, something that always gets people talking.
I know we've touched on this a little already with the EV tax credit, but it sounds like there are even bigger changes being proposed. Figures like Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk. seem to favor a more aggressive approach to cutting what they see as inefficiencies in government. But is that really the best way to go about it?
That's where things get a bit tricky. It's true that some government processes can be bogged down in bureaucracy, but we need to be cautious about going in with a chainsaw approach. Sweeping cuts without careful consideration could damage essential functions we rely on, like national security and public
It's
service.
like trying to fix a leaky faucet with a sledgehammer.
Right.
You might stop the leak, but you'll probably cause a lot more damage in the process. So how do we balance the need?
That's the million-dollar question. And it's a question that has a lot of different answers depending on who you ask. One of the biggest concerns is the impact on government contractors and employees. Investors are already getting nervous and pulling back from companies that do business with the government because of all the uncertainty around these proposed reforms.
So all this talk about reform is actually creating more problems.
In a way, yes. This uncertainty could lead to essential services becoming unstable. We could even see a loss of skilled professionals who work in those fields because they're worried about their jobs. And that's something we can't afford.
Right. It's not just about cutting costs. It's about making sure the system continues to function effectively. So how do we address things like underperforming employees without undermining the entire system?
That's where things get really complex. It's a delicate balance between holding people accountable and preserving the integrity of the system. It's not about throwing out the baby with the bathwater. We need to find a way to make the system work better without dismantling it entirely.
That makes sense. So it sounds like we've got a lot to unpack here. From tiny plants with big potential to the electric vehicle revolution and the complexities of government reform, it's clear that the future is anything but simple.
Absolutely. And the most interesting part is how all of these seemingly separate issues are actually intertwined. The success of EVs depends on government policies. The development of new food technologies like water lentil protein is influenced by regulations, and government reform itself will impact how all of these innovations unfold.
I think that's a great place to pause for now. We've covered a lot of ground already.
Indeed, we have, and there's still much more to explore. It's a bit like navigating the US-China relationship right now, trying to find that sweet spot between pushing for innovation and setting up the right guardrails.
That's a great analogy. We see that same tension playing out in the tech world, especially with AI. Silicon Valley seems to be going all in on AI right now.
And for good reason. AI has the potential to completely transform how businesses operate, making everything more efficient and data-driven. And the US is in a strong position to lead the charge.
I'm curious, why do you say that? What gives the U.S. an edge in the AI race?
Well, we've been organizing data and building the infrastructure for years, which has given us a head start. Tools like Spark and Databricks are making it easier to develop these really powerful AI models that can be used across so many different industries.
So it's like we've laid the groundwork and now it's time to build the skyscrapers. But I also heard that even with all this progress in AI, we still rely on other countries for things like semiconductors, especially from Taiwan and China. That seems a bit risky, doesn't it?
That's the tricky part. We're in this interconnected world of global supply chains, and it's not easy to disentangle ourselves completely. Tariffs and trade restrictions add another layer of complexity.
So it's not as simple as just saying made in America and calling it a day.
Not quite. The pandemic really exposed how vulnerable global supply chains can be. We need to find ways to make them more resilient and adaptable to shocks, whether they're pandemics, natural disasters, or geopolitical tensions.
That makes a lot of sense. But getting back to AI for a moment, I've heard that venture capitalists are a bit hesitant to go all in on AI startups because of all the uncertainty around regulations.
There's definitely some hesitation. We're in a bit of a regulatory limbo right now. Agencies like the SEC and the FTC are still figuring out how to approach these new technologies like AI and blockchain. Until there's more clarity, investors are being cautious.
So it's like waiting for the starting pistol before they start sprinting. But even with all this uncertainty, Silicon Valley seems pretty optimistic about the future.
And with good reason. Once the regulatory landscape stabilizes, I think we'll see a flood of innovation IPOs and mergers. It's going to be an exciting time.
I can't wait to see what kind of amazing things we'll be talking about on Byte-Sized Tech in a few years. But for now, let's circle back to those government reforms. It seems like some folks are really pushing for a major overhaul of how the civil service operates.
Some of the proposals out there are pretty radical. There's this idea that the government needs a complete shakeup to get rid of all the deadwood and bring in fresh ideas. Some even compare the government to an overgrown forest that needs to be cleared out with a controlled burn.
Wow, that's a pretty intense analogy. But isn't there a risk that we could end up destroying valuable things in the process?
That's the big concern. If we're not careful, we could end up undermining the very institutions that are meant to serve the public. It's like trying to fix a leaky faucet with a sledgehammer. You might stop the leak, but you'll probably cause a lot more damage in the process.
So it sounds like it's more about finding the right tools for the job, not just going in with the biggest, most dramatic solution.
Exactly. We need to be strategic and think about the long-term consequences of our actions. Slashing budgets and firing people might seem like a quick fix, but it could end up backfiring in the long run.
It's like that saying, measure twice, cut once. We need to make sure we're solving the problem, not just creating new ones. But it does seem like there are some legitimate concerns about things like accountability and underperforming employees in the civil service.
There are definitely areas where we can improve, but the answer isn't to dismantle the entire system. We need to find ways to reward excellence, encourage innovation, and hold people accountable without sacrificing the core principles of a merit-based system.
That sounds like a tall order. How do we even begin to tackle a problem as complex as government reform?
It starts with having open and honest conversations like the one we're having right now. We need to bring different perspectives to the table and be willing to listen to each other, even if we don't always agree.
I love that. It's all about collaboration and finding common ground, right?
Precisely. And we need to remember that government reform isn't a one-time fix. It's an ongoing process that requires constant adaptation and improvement.
So it's more like tending a garden than performing surgery.
That's a great way to put it. It's about nurturing a healthy and productive environment where everyone can thrive.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm feeling a lot more informed about these complex issues now.
As am I. It's been a truly enlightening discussion, and it highlights how these seemingly disparate topics, food tech, EVs, government reform, are all connected in this intricate web of innovation and progress.
It's like we're all part of this massive experiment trying to figure out how to create a better future.
And that's what makes it so fascinating. There's no single answer, no magic bullet. It's about constantly experimenting, learning, and adapting. And who knows, maybe some of the solutions will come from those tiny water lentils we talked about earlier.
That's a great point. Speaking of those tiny plants, I'm curious about the potential impact of the water lentil industry on global food systems. Could this be the key to addressing food security challenges in the future?
That's a question worth exploring. Water lentils have the potential to be a highly sustainable and affordable source of protein, which could be a game changer for regions facing food shortages. But it's not just about production, it's also about distribution infrastructure and cultural acceptance.
So it's a complex issue with a lot of moving parts.
Absolutely. And it's an area where collaboration between government, scientists, and businesses will be crucial. We need to ensure that these innovations benefit everyone, not just a select few.
It's like we're all in this together trying to figure out how to feed a growing population in a sustainable way.
And that brings us back to the role of government. Policies and regulations can either accelerate or hinder these advancements. It's a reminder that government reform isn't just an abstract concept, it has real-world implications for how we address some of the biggest challenges facing humanity.
I think that's a powerful takeaway. We can't just talk about technology and innovation in a vacuum. We have to consider the broader context, the political landscape, and the social impact.
Exactly. It's about connecting the dots, understanding the interplay of forces, and working together to create a future where technology serves humanity, not the other way around.
It feels like we've been on this incredible journey through the future of food transportation and even government itself.
It's amazing how these threads connect, isn't it? We started with tiny water lentils that could revolutionize the protein industry, zoomed through the evolving landscape of electric vehicles, and then grappled with the complexities of reforming the very systems that shape innovation.
It's like we've been peeling back layers of an onion, revealing more and more complexity with each layer.
Exactly. And it underscores the importance of informed discussion and critical thinking. We can't just accept these innovations at face value. We need to understand their potential impact, the challenges they present, and the role of government in shaping their development.
So for our listeners who are eager to stay ahead of the curve, what are some key trends or developments they should be watching out for in the coming months and years? What's on your radar?
Well, on the food tech front, I'm really curious to see how the water lentil revolution unfolds. Will Rubisco become the next big plant-based protein? Will it live up to its potential to create a more sustainable and healthy food system?
I'm with you on that one.
Yeah.
I'm also eager to see what happens with the EV tax credit. Will it survive the political battles in Washington? And how will that impact the adoption of electric vehicles and the growth of the U.S. manufacturing sector?
Those are critical questions. And of course, the debate surrounding government reform is far from over. We need to keep asking tough questions about how to balance efficiency with effectiveness, how to attract and retain talented people in public service, and how to ensure that government works for everyone, not just a select few.
It's a lot to keep track of, but it's also incredibly exciting. We're living in a time of unprecedented technological advancement, and it's up to all of us to engage in these conversations and shape the future we want to see.
Absolutely. It's not about predicting the future. It's about understanding the forces at play and making informed decisions that will guide us towards a better tomorrow.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this episode of Bite-Sized Tech. We've covered a lot of ground today, from tiny plants to electric cars to the future of government. I hope our listeners are feeling as energized and informed as I am.
It's been a pleasure diving deep into these topics with you. Remember, the future is not something that just happens to us. It's something we create together.
Thanks for tuning in to Bite-Sized Tech. If you enjoyed the episode, like, comment, share, and subscribe for more fun tech discussions.